What's going on, guys? I wanted to share with you this build of this wooden half rack. So this video is actually a little late getting out there. I had actually made this about 5 or 6 months ago, but ended up finishing a few other projects before actually just sitting down and making the video to this. So now that most of the gyms are back open, this may be a good project for someone who's trying to save some money or doesn't have a lot of space to work with where they live. This is by no means a fancy rack at all, but it gets the job done for the basic lifts and it's very durable. I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. The entire project was made entirely out of 2x4s, and it was a big improvement from the rack I made last year when quarantine started, which was very wobbly, and I'm surprised never tipped over, to be honest. So that was the old rack, and you guys can see that it literally almost falls over every time I rack the weight. Before we start, I want you guys to know that these measurements are highly specified for my height. So the bottom I will use as a floor press. The middle section is where I'll do either RDLs, rows, shrugs, basically like the bottom part of a rack, and then the top is for squatting or overhead press. The only tools you'll need for this project is a circular saw and a drill. You can also use clamps as well, but they aren't really necessary. I use them a lot to hold stuff in place while drilling the rack together, but honestly, good old-fashioned elbow grease will do the job too. Next is the actual wood. So honestly, I would just buy a lot of 2x4s. I know that's a very non-specific number, but I don't really remember how many pieces of 2x4s I used since the first stand. I was kind of just experimenting. But in total, I would say 8 to 10 studs of 8 feet or 96 inches at any hardware store will be more than enough wood for the build. For screws, I ended up using 2-inch wood screws, the number 8. I ended up using more than hundreds of screws in this whole project, so honestly, just buy more than you think you will need, and that'll be enough. You'll need 4 small T-plates. You'll need 4 large T-plates. And you'll need 8 of these L-shaped connectors. Now, these were pretty easy to find for me. They were right next to the other brackets, so if you have trouble finding them, just look where the brackets and bracing section is of the hardware store, and you should be able to find these. These essentially connect the bottom half of the rack to the top half. And finally, you'll need 8 corner brackets. So overall, the cost of the project with all the wood and materials should be around $100. I wasn't really trying to budget or save money on this. I kind of just bought stuff as I was building it, especially the first rack. And I probably averaged a little bit over that. If you were really diligent and kind of had a plan and a budget ahead of time, I'm sure you can save even more money for this project. I made a diagram here of the whole rack without the final bracing and side pieces, as well as with the dimensions. Now remember, this is based completely off of my height to squat, so you have to do some experimentation to figure out what the best height is of the pieces. If you're around 6 feet tall, these should work fine, and the bottom pieces and the angled cuts can be the exact same length as mine. Those lengths don't really matter as much as the vertical lengths, because those are the ones you're going to be squatting on. Feel free to just screenshot this so you have an idea of what to work with. There's 2 important things I want to point out. So the bottom piece that's 29.5 inches, that is just laid flat, that's going to actually add 1.5 inches to your project. So the measurements you see are taking that into account. So the tall pieces on the very end that are 63.5 inches, that's exactly right. But when it's measured with a full project, it's actually going to be 65 inches because the bottom adds 1.5 inches. The second thing I want to point out is that you'll notice between all of the pieces there's 1.5 inch gap. So that's essentially going to function as the J hook, or what's going to hold the bar into place. So you see the top two, there's 60.5 inches and 59 inches. That's an 1.5 inch difference. And then so on and so forth as you go further down. Here's what the bottom of the rack looks like with the bracing and side pieces on. Notice that there's a 29.5 inch piece running on the side and a 12 inch piece that is flush with the 8 vertical pieces on top. Just duplicate this onto the other side of the rack and make sure to do everything the same exact way on the second stand that you build. I actually used pocket hole screws to attach the 29.5 inch piece to the T-shaped double end pieces so that it's connected on all sides, but you can also drill through with a very long screw. I just think the pocket hole screws are a lot easier. Make sure that you put the brackets on after all the wood is attached. One other thing to note is you may need to use smaller screws to attach the small T-plate connector as the holes are smaller. I had some small cabinet screws laying around that I was able to use. I wanted to throw some random clips of me actually doing the building so you can see some of the steps. The whole project itself took a few weeks, but the first rack I wasn't working with a plan and just kind of experimenting and seeing what worked in terms of stability, and took it apart a couple times, went back and forth to the store, just figuring out what I was doing. But once I kind of got a groove and figured out more strict measurements, I was able to get a plan for the second stand, and that one only took a few hours. What kind of inspired me to do this was I had some free time around the holidays, and I got the sense that the gyms were going to close again in my area. A lot of gyms in other parts of the country were already starting to close down for a second time. And I really, really wanted to redeem myself from the last rack that I made. So this is a fun project to do. I don't know, I might have a home gym in the future, so it'd be something fun to do. And I think honestly, this would be something good to just hold you over during a time where you don't have a lot of space or room or money, to be honest. Here's some random clips of the L-shaped connectors, how they attach from the bottom to the top. Just some added stability. But yeah, so this is my first attempt at a how-to video. So let me know what you think. I know a question that's going to come up is going to be how strong the rack is, how much weight can it hold. So once I finished it, I just there were a couple 50-pound plates I had in my car, so I just went and threw them on the bar. So this is 205 on the bar. It's a 1-inch barbell, so it weighs a little differently. So I'll do a quick front squat here just so you can kind of see what it looks like when it's unracked and then re-racked. And then once I did that, in a second I'm going to actually jump on the bar itself. So I weigh 215, and remember there's 205 on the barbell, so that's 420 right there. You can see the rack's hardly moving at all. If it wiggles, it's stabilized by the bottom because it's a little bit of a wider base. So I'd say you're good for close to 500 at the top, and the bottom's going to be even stronger. At the old rack I made last year, that super wobbly one, even that held over 400 in the bottom part. So I think this one's much stronger, so you're going to be fine with that. But thanks for watching the video. If you've stuck around this far, I really had fun making this. I love doing this kind of stuff. So let me know if you have any suggestions, how I can make it better, or comments or questions. I'd be happy to answer them. All right, thank you.